Los Angeles history. Los Angeles has a rich and layered past that reflects migration, culture, and transformation over centuries. For nearly 30 years, the city worked through redevelopment efforts in its urban centers, especially downtown Los Angeles, focusing on areas such as Skid Row and nearby neighborhoods. Skid Row itself is one of the most recognized districts in Los Angeles history. Located east of the historic core and south of the Civic Center, it stretches across roughly 50 blocks, bordered by 3rd Street to the north, 7th Street to the south, Main Street to the west, and Alameda Street to the east. This area is home to about 15,000 residents, many living in single-room occupancy hotels, missions, and shelters, with a portion of the population residing on the streets. But the story of Los Angeles begins long before modern development. The area was originally inhabited by indigenous peoples for more than 10,000 years before the arrival of the Spanish. In 1781, settlers from Mexico City established what would become the city of Los Angeles along the Los Angeles River. This new settlement was strategically placed to support the nearby San Gabriel and San Fernando missions, institutions that helped Spain extend control over the region's native population through both religion and agriculture. Los Angeles remained part of New Spain until Mexico declared independence in 1821, and it stayed under Mexican rule until 1848. After the Mexican-American War, California, including Los Angeles, was ceded to the United States. During this time, waves of American settlers arrived, especially after the discovery of gold in 1848. This migration reshaped the region, often at the expense of the Spanish and Mexican residents whose land rights were stripped despite earlier promises of protection. The Civil War era brought another turning point. The construction of the Transcontinental Railroad linked the eastern United States to the Pacific coast. Initially, San Francisco was the main western destination. But Los Angeles business leaders successfully pushed for the railroad to extend south, and soon the city became connected through a rail spur that entered along the Los Angeles River. By the late 19th century, agriculture became Los Angeles's primary export, shipped directly from these new rail lines. From its indigenous roots to Spanish colonization, Mexican rule, and eventual American expansion, the history of Los Angeles tells the story of resilience, transformation, and ambition. Each wave of migration and development shaped the city into the global hub it would eventually become. Los Angeles history, Skid Row and the 20th century. As Los Angeles grew, its industries attracted waves of workers. Agriculture in particular created a seasonal economy, drawing in young, single men who needed temporary housing. To serve them, small hotels and boarding houses appeared, along with bars and entertainment venues. In response, the temperance movement brought missions and social service organizations, laying the foundation for the network of shelters and outreach programs that still define the area. By the 1890s, petroleum was discovered in Los Angeles. This discovery fueled another migration, as workers poured in to take advantage of new opportunities. Alongside petroleum, the automobile industry took root, making Los Angeles the second largest center of car manufacturing in the United States, second only to Detroit. Not long after, the film industry arrived. Drawn by Los Angeles's favorable climate and diverse scenery, filmmakers found the perfect backdrop for every type of story. Meanwhile, the railroads promoted Southern California as a paradise, clean air, endless sunshine, and new opportunities, enticing even more people to settle in the region. During the Great Depression, thousands of families displaced from the Midwest saw Los Angeles as their chance for a fresh start. Many arrived with dreams of prosperity, but reality proved harsher. While some rebuilt their lives, others, especially those struggling with poverty or addiction, remained in rail yards, under bridges, or in small hotels near train stations. This marked the beginnings of a permanent underclass in Skid Row. The mid-20th century brought new transformations. During World War II, Los Angeles quickly shifted its automobile industry into war production. Factories hired tens of thousands, and many more people passed through the city on their way to the Pacific Front. Social service organizations grew alongside, adapting to meet the needs of soldiers and workers. But Los Angeles was also a segregated city. Minority workers and returning veterans were confined to certain neighborhoods, and Skid Row became one of the few high-tolerance communities open to them. Over time, the population shifted, from predominantly white, alcohol-dependent men during the Depression to a more diverse, largely minority community after the wars. Many returned from combat with trauma, stress disorders, or drug exposure, creating new social challenges. By the 1960s and 70s, Skid Row had become a center for those struggling with addiction, homelessness, and mental illness. What had once been a transitional district for seasonal workers had evolved into a permanent community of marginalized residents. In many ways, it mirrored the broader story of Los Angeles history, an ever-changing city shaped by migration, industry, and the struggles of those seeking opportunity, often finding hardship instead. Los Angeles history, Skid Row from the 1960s to today. By the late 1960s, Los Angeles faced a growing problem in Skid Row. Businesses were moving out, housing conditions were deteriorating, and the city stepped in with a program of code enforcement. Property owners were told to either repair or demolish unsafe buildings. Many chose demolition, unwilling to pay for costly repairs. In just 10 years, from the mid-1960s to the mid-1970s, nearly half of the area's housing disappeared. Units dropped from about 15,000 to just 7,500. This loss of affordable housing coincided with a citywide slow-growth movement, where many neighborhoods resisted new housing development. As a result, overall housing availability declined, prices rose, and those at the bottom of the economic ladder were pushed onto the streets. At the same time, downtown Los Angeles itself was undergoing urban renewal. In places like Bunker Hill, entire neighborhoods were demolished and residents relocated. But when the city turned to Skid Row, it took a different approach. Instead of clearing the area, officials aimed to preserve what remained, stabilizing housing, protecting social service networks, and keeping the community intact. This policy became known as containment. On one hand, it provided essential housing and services for the city's most vulnerable residents. On the other, it was also a way to keep Skid Row's population from spreading into other redeveloped parts of downtown. In effect, Skid Row was preserved as both a safety net and a boundary zone, helping some, but isolating many. By the 1990s, Los Angeles entered a new era. Economic recession hit not just factory workers, but also the middle class. Families living paycheck to paycheck suddenly faced job loss, foreclosure, and displacement. As before, Skid Row absorbed those in crisis. But this time, something new happened. More women, and women with children, began arriving in search of shelter and services. Historically, Skid Row was seen as a community for single adult men. It had no schools, few public amenities, and a heavy industrial character. With the arrival of families, social service agencies split in their approach. Some argued that women and children should be quickly relocated to more suitable neighborhoods. Others began advocating for family housing and expanded services within Skid Row itself. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, new pressures emerged as nearby communities experienced a resurgence in investment and redevelopment. This created tension between revitalization efforts and the continuing presence of Skid Row, whose challenges, homelessness, addiction, mental illness, remain deeply visible in the heart of downtown Los Angeles. Today, Skid Row stands as one of the most concentrated communities of homelessness and poverty in the United States. Its evolution, from a district for seasonal laborers, to a refuge for Depression-era migrants, to a containment zone in the modern city, reflects the broader struggles and contradictions of Los Angeles history itself. It is a story of opportunity and exclusion, resilience and hardship, playing out side by side in one of America's most iconic cities. Skid Row's future has long been at the heart of public policy debates in Los Angeles. By the early 2000s, change was pressing in on its borders. The historic core, once full of abandoned office buildings, began returning to life with loft conversions. Little Tokyo re-emerged as a vibrant mix of commercial and residential spaces, while the arts district to the east transformed into a creative live-work community with galleries and studios. With reinvestment surging around Skid Row, critical questions arose. Should the neighborhood remain an area primarily for single adult men, or should policy shift to welcome families, especially as women and children increasingly sought services there? Did it make sense that families could live on one side of Main Street in downtown, but not the other? Another pressing issue was income diversity. Skid Row traditionally served the extremely low-income population, housing of last resort for people with nowhere else to go. Some argued that introducing a broader mix of incomes could bring stability and retail services to the neighborhood. But others feared it would drive up rents, reducing the already limited stock of housing for the poorest residents. Beneath it all lay a larger regional question. Should Skid Row remain the primary, and sometimes the only, hub for housing and services for Los Angeles' most vulnerable populations? Or should those responsibilities be shared across the wider region, so that no single neighborhood bears the entire burden? The future of Skid Row remains uncertain. What is clear is that the debates over income mix, family housing, and regional responsibility are not just about policy, they are about the lives of tens of thousands of people who call this fragile community home. If you found this history of Skid Row insightful, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to History Love, and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive into the stories that shaped our cities. Share your thoughts in the comments. Should Skid Row remain a concentrated hub for housing and services, or should Los Angeles spread the responsibility across the entire region?